The sky turned black in seconds. One moment. Sarah was reading a report on plant samples. The next moment, alarms screamed across the ship. Red lights flashed, and the ship shook like it had been punched by a giant. Stabilize the system. The captain shouted from the command deck, but it was too late. The storm had come out of nowhere. Not even the sensors picked it up in time. Sarah was thrown against the wall. She grabbed a handle and held on as the floor tilted. The ship was going down. The stars outside turned into streaks of light as they entered the atmosphere of an unknown planet. Somewhere across the hall, Kalen, alien from the Zeorith race, was doing the same. He had 4 arms, purple-gray skin, and glowing lines down his neck to Sarah. He had always looked a bit frightening, but now he was just another soul trying. To survive, they had been on the same exploration crew, barely spoken a word to each other. Now, both were trapped in a ship that was falling apart. "Brace for impact," the computer said coldly. Sarah didn't have time to think. She closed her eyes and screamed. The crash was like thunder. The ship slammed into the ground with a roar that echoed through the planet's empty sky. Metal tore like paper. Fire burst through the sides. Everything went black. She woke up hours later. Coughing from smoke, her forehead was bleeding, and her leg ached badly. She crawled through broken glass and wires. "Hello?" She called out, voice cracking. "Is anyone there?" A sound came from the shadow's sharp, low breathing. She froze. Heart pounding, then Kale stepped out, limping, his arm injured but eyes clear. He looked at her, then at the wreck, then back at her. "We're alive," he said, voice deep and rough. "Barely," she whispered, staring at the remains of the ship. Everything was broken. No signal, no food storage, no escape pod. The crew gone. Only she and Kale had survived the crash. They stood on the edge of a dry desert. The sky was purple, the wind hot and full of strange smells. No birds, no animals, no sound except the burning wreck behind them. Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. She turned away so Kale wouldn't see her cry. "We need water," she said instead. Kale nodded. "I scanned a possible source before the crash," he said. "We walk." They walked in silence for hours. The ground cracked beneath their feet. Once, Sarah almost stepped into a deep pit, but Kale caught her arm just in time. She pulled back quickly, not used to his touch, but she nodded in thanks. The sun, if it could be called, that was enormous and orange. It cast long shadows that looked like monsters. Each shadow felt like it was watching them. "We are not alone here," Kale said finally. Sarah looked at him. "What do you mean?" "This planet was empty," he said. "But now it is waking." She didn't understand, but she didn't argue either. By nightfall, they reached a shallow canyon. Inside was a pool of greenish water. It looked disgusting, but Kale scanned it and nodded. "Drink," he said. "Safe." Sarah fell to her knees and drank. It tasted strange, like metal and fruit mixed together, but it cooled her burning throat. Kale sat nearby, scanning the stars with a cracked device. "No signal," he said. "We are lost." Sarah finally spoke. What they were both thinking. "No one's coming," she said. Voice shaking, he didn't argue. They built a small fire with debris from the crash. Kale used glowing stones to spark the flame. Sarah watched in silence. Surprised by the beauty of it, the flames danced in his eyes. He looked different, now like a threat. "But like someone who knew how to survive. We will make shelter tomorrow," Kale said. "And after that?" Sarah asked. "We live," he replied, "one day at a time." She nodded, too tired to argue. The stars above them blinked slowly, like ancient eyes. The planet didn't speak, but she felt like it was listening. Somewhere in the distance, something growled. They both turned, but saw nothing. Sarah moved closer to the fire. Kale sat beside her. Quiet and still. The night was long, but they were alive. For now, That was enough. Asterisk, the fire crackled softly in the middle of the camp. Sarah sat with her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the flames. The desert night was colder than she had imagined. Her skin was covered in goosebumps, and her breath came out in soft clouds. Kale, the alien engineer, sat across from her, sharpening a metal shard into a knife. His glowing lines dimmed and brightened like a heartbeat. Sarah didn't speak. She still didn't know what to say to him. They were from different worlds, different species, but now they were all each. Other had. Her eyes moved to the remains of the shipwreck far behind them. Black smoke still curled into the sky. That was their signal, but no one had answered. I thought rescue would come today, she whispered. Kale didn't look up. It will not, he said calmly. Sarah frowned. How do you know? He finally looked at her. My kind does not send search parties for failures. There was a heavy silence. Sarah swallowed hard. You call this a failure? Kale stood slowly, looking up at the stars. I call it reality, he said. And reality says we are alone. Sarah looked down at her hands. Blisters had formed on her palms from climbing rocks earlier. Her leg still hurt from the crash, but inside, what hurt more was the fear, the deep, creeping fear that they would never leave this place. The fire started to die. Kale reached into a pouch and took out a small glowing stone. He placed it near the wood, and suddenly, blue flames danced back to life. Sarah's eyes widened. What is that? Kale finally showed a small smile. Xerath Firestone, he said. Burns with no smoke. Good for hiding. She leaned forward, warming her hands. It's beautiful, she said softly. Kale tilted his head. You are. Strange, he said. Sarah looked at him, surprised. Thanks, she muttered. Unsure if it was an insult or not, they sat in silence again. Then, Sarah asked, Why did you save me during the crash? Kale didn't answer at first. Then he said, You were alive, so I helped. That's all. Kale nodded. For now, they both watched the stars for a while. Strange sounds echoed from far away, clicks, howls, and soft rumbling. This planet was not empty. It only seemed quiet. The next morning, the heat returned quickly. Sarah woke up coughing and sweating. The fire was out, and Kale was gone. Panic filled her chest. Kale, shouted, standing up too fast. Her leg throbbed in pain. Kale? Then, he appeared from the rocks, carrying a bundle of strange plants. She sighed in relief, but tried to hide it. He placed the plants on a flat stone. Food, he said. Sarah raised her eyebrows. That looks deadly. Kale shrugged. Many things look deadly, but are not, she hesitated. Then took a bite. It tasted like mint and dirt mixed together, but her stomach welcomed it later. They started building shelter. They used metal scraps from the ship and large leaves Kale had found. He moved with skill, quiet and focused. Sarah did her best to help, but her legs slowed her down. Kale noticed, without a word, he tied a vine around her knee. It eased the pain. Thanks, she said. You should not carry too much, he said. I'm not weak. She replied quickly. Kale didn't argue. I know, he said. Surprising. By nightfall, the shelter was ready. A small lean-to. Protected from wind and hidden behind a rock wall, it wasn't much, but it felt like safety that night. They shared their first calm meal. The fire glowed blue and warm. Sarah watched Kale as he studied the planet's dust under his scanner. You're a science officer? She asked. Kale nodded. Engineer, he said. I study structure, energy, survival. She pointed to herself, botanist. She said. Kale looked at her. I know, he said. You do? I saw your file, he said. Before the mission, I read every human file. Sarah laughed. Didn't think you cared. Kale blinked slowly. Caring is new to me, he said. Sarah's smile faded. replaced with something softer. The wind picked up again. Sarah pulled her arms close. Cale noticed and stood. He took a piece of thermal cloth and draped it over her shoulders. She looked up at him. Surprised, he didn't speak. He just sat down beside her, closer than before. They both watched the fire. A single spark floated up into the sky. Far in the distance, something howled again. But it didn't feel as scary this time. Not with the fire between them. And not with someone sitting beside her. Something was changing. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. It was a truce. And it was just the beginning. The third week began with thunder, but there were no clouds. The sky was clear, purple as always. Yet the earth rumbled beneath their feet like something below was trying to speak. Sarah stood near the small garden she and Cale had started. A few strange vines had taken root, their leaves pulsing gently under the sunlight. Cale scanned the soil with his broken reader, mumbling something in his own language. Suddenly, the ground shifted again. Cale looked up sharply. "Move," he said, grabbing her arm. Before she could ask why, the earth cracked nearby, sending dust into the air. They backed away just in time as a small section of land collapsed into a hole. Revealing darkness below, they stared into the new pit. It wasn't just a hole, lit was a tunnel, smooth and shaped like it had been carved. The walls were marked with glowing blue veins, almost like blood vessels. Cale narrowed his eyes. "This is not natural," he said. Sarah stared, heart racing. "It looks alive." After packing supplies and lighting a firestone, they decided to go in. The tunnel twisted down into the planet, colder and darker with every step. Sarah gripped the wall for balance. Feeling it pulse faintly beneath her fingers, it was like touching skin. She pulled her hand away with a shiver. "This place gives me chills." Cale didn't respond, but his breathing had changed too. Quieter, slower, like he was being watched. The deeper they went, the more strange the tunnel became. The walls were no longer just stone, they were soft in some places. And warm, blue light glowed from the ceiling like stars. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a huge cave. Sarah gasped. It was like a heart, massive and round, pulsing slowly with light and heat. In the center was a pool, not of water, but something. Glowing and golden, the air felt thick, heavy with energy. Cale stepped forward carefully, scanning. "There is no power source," he whispered. "Then what is this?" Sarah asked. He shook his head. "I don't know," he said, "but this planet is." Not just rock and dust, they circled the glowing pool. Sarah's foot slipped on a wet patch, and she fell, hitting her head on a smooth stone. Cale was beside her in seconds. Lifting her head gently, she winced in pain. A cut bleeding just above her eyebrow. Cale tore a strip from his cloak and pressed it to the wound. Then, without warning, he touched 2 fingers to the glowing lines on his neck and pressed them to her skin. Warmth spread instantly. The pain faded. The wound began. Too close, Sarah stared at him, stunned. "What did you do?" "My body can release healing cells," Cale explained softly. Like medicine, she touched her skin, now smooth again. "That's amazing," she whispered. Cale's hand was still on her cheek. Neither moved, for the first time, there. Eyes locked not as alien and human, but as 2 beings who had survived together. Sarah looked away, heart pounding. "Thank you," she said. Cale lowered his hand slowly. "You're welcome," he replied, voice quieter than usual. They stayed in the cave for hours. It felt warm and safe. Sarah rested against the smooth wall, feeling the hum beneath her back. "It's like the planet is alive," she said. Cale nodded. "Some legends speak of living worlds." He said, "Worlds that choose who can stay." Sarah frowned. "Choose?" Cale nodded. "Some believe the heart of the planet can awaken. And if it accepts you, it helps you." She looked around the glowing cave. Do you think it accepts us? Kale looked at her, his expression unreadable. I think it's watching, he said, waiting. On their way out, Sarah touched one of the walls again. It pulsed gently under her hand. Not just once this time, it responded to her touch. Like a slow heartbeat, her fingers trembled. She pulled back wide-eyed Kale. I think it felt me. He turned, walked over, and placed his hand beside hers. The pulse grew stronger, warmer. It feels both of us. He said. They exchanged a look, part fear, part wonder. By the time they returned to the surface, night had fallen, but the fire at their camp flared higher than usual, as if something was fueling it. Kale stared into the flames. This planet has changed since we arrived, he said. Sarah sat beside him, still thinking about the cave. Maybe it's not just the planet, she said softly. Kale glanced at her. Maybe we're changing too. And in the silence that followed, something unspoken passed between them, something new, something fragile, something more than survival. Asterisk. The wind howled outside the shelter. Sand scraped against the walls like claws. But inside, the fire burned low and steady, casting a warm orange glow across the stone floor. Sarah sat with her back against the wall, arms around her knees, eyes wide open. She couldn't sleep. Not after what they'd seen in the cave. Not with the feeling still on her skin, the pulse of the planet, the warmth in her chest. She looked across the fire. Kale sat silently, head resting on his arms, but his eyes were also open, glowing faintly in the dark. You're not sleeping either, Sarah whispered. Kale lifted his head. No, he replied, voice quiet but calm. They sat in silence for a moment, only the crackling of the fire between them. Sarah reached toward the flames, warming her fingers. Her voice trembled slightly. Back on Earth, I hated the quiet, she said. Too many memories. Kale tilted his head. Memories of what? She hesitated, then answered, my brother died in a shuttle accident. She said, he was just 17. Kale's expression changed, his gaze softening. I am sorry, he said gently. Sarah smiled weakly. You didn't cause it. But pain is pain, Kale replied, and I understand it. Kale leaned forward, stirring the fire with a stick. On Earth, he said, we are raised to serve the collective, not family. I was not supposed to feel emotion, but I had a sister. What happened to her? Sarah asked, voice barely above a whisper. She vanished during a training mission. Kale said, eyes glowing softer now. No one searched for her, because they believed it was weakness to care. Sarah's chest tightened. She moved closer to the fire. They were different species, born light years apart. But right now, their pain felt the same. Real, quiet, and heavy. The wind screamed louder. Something struck the shelter wall from outside. Sarah flinched. Kale stood quickly, grabbing the metal shard they used for protection. But the sound faded as fast as it came. Just the storm, nothing more. Kale sat back down, this time closer to her. His body heat radiated toward her like a second fire. She glanced at him, surprised by the closeness. But she didn't move away. Do you believe in destiny? Sarah asked suddenly. Kale looked confused. Explain, he said. She took a deep breath, like, maybe we didn't end up here by accident. Kale considered her words. I believe in cause and effect, he said. But sometimes, strange things happen that feel more. They were both quiet again. Sarah leaned her head back against the stone wall and closed her eyes. But she couldn't stop thinking about the cave, about Kale, about how her heart had started to beat faster every time he looked at her. Kale, she said, not opening her eyes. Yes, he replied. That night you healed me. It felt like something changed. Kale didn't speak at first. Then he said, it changed for me too. She opened her eyes slowly. Kale was watching her, not blinking. He looked at her face the way someone looks at a puzzle they finally understand. She moved closer without thinking. Just a little. The fire warmed her back. But Cale's presence warmed her chest. "I don't know what this is," she whispered. "Neither do I," Cale said. Then he did something surprising. He reached out, slowly, and touched her cheek. His fingers were warm, rough, but careful. Sarah leaned into the touch, eyes half closed. Her heart was pounding. She wasn't sure if it was fear or something else entirely. Their faces were inches apart now. The wind outside no longer mattered. The distance between stars didn't matter either. Just two hearts, human and alien, beating strangely in sync. "I thought I'd die here," she whispered. Cale's voice was deep and soft. "Maybe we live here instead." And then their lips met, not perfectly, not like in the stories, but gently, hesitantly. It was strange and new, but it didn't feel wrong. The fire beside them flared. The wind outside grew quiet for a moment, like the world paused to watch. When they pulled apart, Sarah was breathless. Cale's eyes glowed a little brighter. They said nothing. Words weren't needed now. That night, they didn't sleep. They talked, touched, shared things they never told anyone else. They held each other through the night. Not because they were weak, but because, finally, they weren't alone. And when dawn came, painting the sky with strange colors, Sarah leaned against Cale's chest and whispered the words she didn't expect to say on a distant planet. "I feel safe with you." Cale placed his hand gently over hers. "And I feel alive." The sun rose, but their night wasn't over. It had only just begun. Sarah stood by the edge of the canyon. The wind carried the scent of dry sand and strange flowers. Her hands rested on her stomach. Something felt off, not painful, but different. She had woken up that morning with nausea, not from the food or the heat. It was something deeper, a twisting in her gut, a sense of heaviness in her chest. Cale had noticed too. "You are pale," he said, examining her carefully. "I feel strange," she replied, rubbing her arms. Tired, lightheaded. He placed a scanner stone against her skin. Its glow flickered, then pulsed rapidly. Cale's brows furrowed. "That is not normal," he said quietly. Sarah sat on a rock, eyes closed, breathing slowly. She had hoped it was nothing, just exhaustion, stress, but her body said otherwise. Cale sat beside her. He looked down at the stone again. Its lines were flashing in a pattern he hadn't seen before. He tapped the stone 3 times, activating the deeper scan, and then the reading appeared. Cale stared at it for a long moment. He didn't speak, didn't move. Sarah opened her eyes. "What is it?" Cale looked up at her. There was shock in his face. Confusion too. "You are carrying a life," he said slowly. Sarah blinked. It took her a few seconds to understand. "What?" she whispered. "You are pregnant." Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at him, frozen. "No," she said, shaking her head. "That's not possible." Cale stood, pacing slowly. "I ran the scan twice," he said. "Your blood has changed. The child is forming quickly, too quickly." Sarah's hands trembled. She looked down at herself. This wasn't supposed to happen. They were different species, different DNA. It shouldn't be possible. "I don't understand," she said, voice cracking. Cale stopped walking. "I don't either," said. "But this planet? It may be part of it." Sarah stood up suddenly. "This is insane," she said. "I don't even know what's growing inside me." Cale approached slowly. "I will protect you," Kay said gently, "no matter what." She looked at him, eyes wide. "Are you saying this child is real?" He nodded. "I can feel its presence already." Sarah took a shaky breath. "What if it's not human?" "It won't be," Cale replied calmly. "It will be something new. They sat in silence. For a long time, Sarah's mind raced. Was this a gift or a curse? Was she still Sarah, the botanist from Earth? Or had she become something else, something chosen by a living planet? Later that evening, she stared at the alien fire as Kale cooked the glowing roots. She hadn't eaten all day. Her body felt drained, like the energy was being pulled into the small life forming inside her. Kale handed her a cup of warmed liquid. "It will help with the sickness," he said. She nodded, sipping slowly. It tasted like mint and honey, strange, but comforting. "Are you angry?" Kale asked suddenly. Sarah looked up at him. "No," she said softly. "Just scared." He sat beside her, careful not to touch her unless invited. His presence was calming. "You are strong," he said. "You survived the crash, the storms, the fear. You can survive this too." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. The fire flickered, and the stars above seemed to shimmer brighter. "I don't want to be alone," she whispered. "You won't be," Kale replied firmly. "Not ever again." That night, she dreamed of the cave, but this time it was glowing brighter. She stood in the center, holding a child with glowing eyes and soft skin. Kale was beside her, and the planet hummed like a lullaby. When she awoke, Kale was already watching her. "You made sounds while sleeping," he said. "Not cries," he added. "Soft, peaceful sounds." She smiled for the first time in days. "I saw it," she said. "I saw our child." Kale placed his hand gently over hers. His touch was warm and steady. "The planet is guiding us," he said. "And I will follow, if you do." Sarah nodded. She still didn't understand how this was happening. But one thing was clear. She was not just surviving anymore. She was growing, changing, becoming part of something new. And deep inside her, a heartbeat answered. Not her own, but one that was stronger every day. The ground shook under Sarah's feet. She froze, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping the canyon wall. Kale stood just a few meters away, eyes locked on the horizon. Dust swirled in the air. Rising like smoke, another tremor rippled through the sand. It wasn't like before. It wasn't natural. It felt like something. Waking up, Kale dropped his scanner stone. "The planet is shifting," he said. Sarah's heart pounded. "Because of me," she whispered. Kale didn't answer right away, but his silence was enough. They returned to their shelter. Packing quickly, the winds howled louder, the air heavier. Something in the sky had changed too. The colors were darker. The clouds moved unnaturally fast. "Where do we go?" Sarah asked, holding her small bag of supplies. Kale pointed toward the west. "There's a high rock ridge," he said. "If we can get above the dust, we can see what's coming." As they walked, the ground cracked beneath them, not deeply but wide, long lines stretching like veins across the desert floor. Sarah stumbled and fell. Kale rushed to her side. "I'm fine," she said, catching her breath. "But it's getting worse." When they reached the ridge, they looked out over the valley below. What they saw made Sarah's legs go weak. Shapes were moving through the dust, large, fast, and not human. They were under the ground, Kale said in a low voice. Sarah stared at the figures. Some had long limbs. Others slithered. Their bodies glowed faintly like the cave walls, like the living pulse of the planet. "They're alive because of me," she whispered again. Kale placed his hand on her shoulder. "No," he said firmly. "They were always here, but something in you woke them." They moved down the other side of the ridge, looking for a new place to hide. Kale led them to a rock arch where they could take shelter temporarily. Sarah sat down slowly, breathing hard. Her pregnancy was further along than it should be. Kale had said her body was changing fast, like it was syncing with the planet's rhythm. He examined her again, placing the glowing scanner near her abdomen. The heartbeat is strong, he said, but the energy levels are. Rising, Sarah frowned. What does that mean? Cale looked at her. It means the child is not only alive, he said, it is connected to this world. As night fell, they saw more creatures in the distance. One stopped and looked directly at them. Its eyes glowed like fire. It didn't attack, just stared, then vanished into the mist. They don't fear us, Sarah said. No, Cale replied. They recognize you, that night. They didn't sleep again. The stars above were hidden by thick black clouds. Strange sounds echoed across the land, deep, moaning calls and sharp clicking noises. Something massive moved through the sand, leaving behind a trail of glowing footprints. Cale sat close beside Sarah, sharpening his metal shard. If they come, he said, I will fight. Sarah touched his hand. You don't have to protect me alone, she said. Cale looked at her seriously. You carry something sacred. He said, I will give my life if I must. The fire flickered lower. Sarah felt the baby move. Inside her, a soft flutter at first, then stronger, like a message. She placed both hands on her belly and closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw flashes of images. The cave, the glowing pool, the heartbeat of the planet, and a soft voice, not in words, but feelings. The child inside her was not afraid. It was calm. Like it knew this world, she opened her eyes slowly. They won't hurt us, she said. Cale blinked. How do you know? I just feel it, she said. They're not angry. They're guarding something. Cale nodded slowly. Then we must find what it is. At sunrise, they followed the footprints of the largest creature. It led them to a hidden valley surrounded by tall black stones. At the center stood a massive structure, ancient, cracked, and covered in glowing vines. A temple, Cale said in awe. Sarah stared at it. The closer she walked, the stronger the child inside her kicked, like it was excited, like it was home. The door opened on its own when she stepped close. Inside was a circular chamber, walls pulsing with light, and in the middle an altar made of crystal, shaped like a cradle. Cale touched the edge of the altar. This is where it begins, he said. Sarah felt her knees weaken. Here. Yes, he said. The planet brought us here for this. And outside, in the distance, the creatures began to gather. Not to attack, but to witness. Something ancient was returning, and it lived inside her. Sarah lay on the altar of crystal, sweat running down her face. Oh. The air inside the temple was thick and glowing. Cale stood beside her, holding her hand tightly with one of his forearms. The others were ready, holding cloth, water, a scanner, a knife. The creatures had gathered outside, silent, unmoving, like statues. Hundreds of glowing eyes watched the temple from the valley below. Not one had come closer. Not one had made a sound. Sarah screamed, her voice echoing through the crystal walls. Another wave of pain hit her, sharper than the last. Cale leaned close, his voice calm and deep. You are strong, he whispered. You can do this. She gritted her teeth. Her body trembled. But deep inside, she felt a presence, not just her child, but the planet itself. It was with her, guiding her, helping her. Cale placed the scanner stone against her belly again. The child is ready, he said. Eyes wide, Sarah looked into his face and nodded once. Then let's meet them, she whispered. Minutes passed like hours. The pain grew worse. But Sarah didn't scream again. She focused on the feeling. Connection. She wasn't afraid now. Then, at last, it happened. A soft cry filled the chamber. Not loud, not shrill, but clear and full of life. Cale caught the child in his arms, his hands trembling, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. The baby had smooth skin with faint shimmer, small glowing lines down its back, eyes that changed from blue to gold. Sarah cried silently. staring at her child. Kale gently placed the baby in her arms. She held it close, breathing deeply. "It's warm," she whispered. "So warm." The baby stared up at her, not crying now, just blinking slowly, as if it understood everything. Suddenly, the ground beneath them hummed. Not shaking, not violent, but steady, like a giant heartbeat. Kale stood slowly, looking around. The temple walls began to glow brighter. Symbols appeared on the ceiling, spinning slowly in the light. "What is happening?" Sarah asked, holding the baby close. Kale walked to the altar edge and looked up. "The planet is responding," he said, "to the birth outside." The creatures all lifted their heads toward the sky. A sound began low and soft, like a song, not from mouths, but from the ground itself. Then the sky above cracked with light. A massive beam shot up from the temple. Bright blue energy rose into the clouds and beyond. It wasn't random. It was a signal. Kale's eyes widened. "They will hear it," he said. "Your people, my people." Sarah looked down at her child, who was still calm, still watching. "Was this why we came here?" She whispered. Kale looked at her and nodded. "We didn't crash," he said. "We were called." Hours passed, but no one moved. Not the creatures outside, not the child in Sarah's arms. Only the signal continued rising into the stars. That night, they rested near the altar. Sarah lay with the child beside her. Kale stood watch, scanning the sky every few minutes. Then, just before dawn, he saw it, a flicker of silver light. Then another, a ship. Sarah sat up, holding the baby close. Kale stared into the sky as the rescue ship descended. It was human. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "They came," she said. "They actually came." The ship landed near the valley. The creatures stepped aside, not afraid, just watching, waiting. The door opened and armed humans stepped out. Their weapons dropped the moment they saw Sarah. She stood, weak but strong, the child in her arms. Glowing softly, one of the officers ran toward her. "Dr. Sarah Holt." She nodded slowly. "Yes, you've been missing for 4 months," he said. Shocked, Sarah looked surprised. "To us, it's only been a few weeks," she said. The officer looked at the child, eyes wide, and, "My child," she said calmly. "Born of this planet." Kale stepped beside her, silent but proud. The officer's hand moved toward his weapon, but another man stopped him. "He's not attacking." The second man said, "Stand down." Sarah walked forward. "We need to leave carefully." She said, "The planet is alive, and these beings are not just animals. They're guardians." The crew looked around nervously, but they listened. One by one, the humans lowered their weapons. Kale carried the supplies. Sarah carried. The child and the signal above began to fade as they boarded the ship. Sarah paused at the door. She turned back, looking at the glowing valley. "I'll return someday," she whispered. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maybe this time." Together, the ship lifted off. The planet grew smaller beneath them, but something had changed in the stars. Something new had been born, not just a child, but a future.